English translation 717th Contact, Part 3. Thursday the 4th of April 2019, 21:06 hours.
But before I forget, I would like to bring up something else. On the evening of the General Assembly, or the 6th of April, I went with some core group members from the hall down to the street before the meditation at 2050 HRS, where we made an interesting observation. Coming from the west, we saw a large object with a strong yellow glow, which flew at low altitude and estimated, from our position, only about 1 kilometer away over the southern horizon towards the east. This happened completely silently and with a constant yellow glowing light intensity. The whole thing lasted little more than 3 minutes, as I noted on my HRS, but I also wanted to find out which of you play-aren was watching this spectacle, so I tried to find out which of you was piloting the object. My mental calls were unsuccessful, however, so I made another attempt 10 minutes later and called Bermunda, because I knew that she was present in the area that evening to record the GV. So I asked her about the passing object and learned from her that she and her companion had also observed it, and that it had not been a play-aren or sonar flying apparatus, but one of the Earth foreigners.
This was indeed the case and was also so recorded by Bermunda in her report.
An identical object of the same light color and intensity, as well as about the same size, was already observed by us in the autumn of 1977, and it was also at the same time then, coming from the west and flying completely silently over the southern horizon towards the east. At that time, we were building the meditation room with Guido, Hans and Conny Schutzbach working on the concrete machine, and when I came to them to give them instructions for the concrete consistency, we saw the object, but since then there has never been anything like it again, until just now or on the 6th of April. Your daughter Simya Se then explained to me that the object was precisely Earth foreigners whose presence on Earth had been based on it since time immemorial.
Stop, Edward. You are not to speak openly about this. Knowing also why you had to make this commitment, which also relates to all the other facts of Earth foreigners coming to Earth since time immemorial and also being stationed here.
I also did not want to say anything about what you assume, because I know about my commitment, which is why you did not have to bring it to my attention.
Then I apologize, Edward. I should have known that.
Fair enough, it is no problem. Even though I have been largely oriented by you, also already by Svath about the Earth foreigners and all their trappings, also in connection with the machinations of the US Americans, this does not cause or entice me to speak or utter even one word too much about it.
However, certain circles have feared this since the time when you went public with your mission, and also with the fact of our common contacts, which also in this respect, precisely with regard to your knowledge of all the facts, led to multiple attacks against your life. But the fact that you keep your obligation of silence and do not reveal your knowledge according to your obligation in this respect, that also conveys a certain protection to you against various secret services, whereby especially.
Fair enough, because now it is certainly appropriate that you do not say anything either. But what I wanted to say when you interrupted me was simply this: whose presence on Earth has been based since time immemorial on behaving according to certain guidelines that also give them security and protection. I did not want to say more, for their existence could also be endangered if the real truth about them, their doings, their ways, as well as their origin and whereabouts, etc. were known. But this must not happen. Earth foreigners are also beings whose right to exist and live must be granted and assured to them, but which would be endangered if certain facts about them became known. But this also applies to the earthly grouping, which also makes itself felt here and there.
My objection was premature. Excuse me, because in principle I know that I do not have to have any reservations, but I too am a...
Human beings, I think you meant to say. I am going to interrupt you and say that we all are, and as such we sometimes think too quickly and then assume something that can perhaps be called premature. But that, I think, can happen when something is feared. However, it will certainly be useless to argue about this now, Because I would like to address what I mentioned earlier, namely that you take my transcript away from my computer just as precisely as you do with everything I write for you. By that I mean that you also take away every letter as soon as I have written it, but it should not be the same as with the one for you, that I can only check every word completely. But that the text, in contrast to the one for you, remains with me in the computer, because I then have to print it out and also want to have it checked by Bernadette for spelling mistakes. In this way, I think that impairments, disturbances and falsifications, etc. can no longer cause such serious damage as before, because if I could retrieve the report from Zafanat Panich if necessary or simply beam it back to my computer, then the entire sectarian oscillations would be able to keep me as long as wide. This is precisely because then all impairments, disturbances and falsifications, etc., at least larger and more serious ones, would no longer cause any problems. Small interferences would therefore also no longer play a role because they can easily be ironed out if we discover them.
You have ideas and desires, Edouard, that amaze me, I must say. Yes, in any case, I will talk to Zafanat Paneach and present your desire to him. For your idea, it might very well be possible that Zafanat Paneach can arrange what is necessary for it. Your idea is good, and actually we should have come across it earlier, but now you have beaten us to it. But what I wanted to explain before we turn to the predictions was that you do not have to transcribe my father's predictions into the German language form, as is usually the case from our conversation conducted in Swiss German, because I agreed with Zafanat Paneach to transmit the predictions to you in the direct German form, as my father Schwath handwrote them at that time. For this, however, I stipulate that neither a word nor a sentence, etc., may be changed, except that spelling mistakes are corrected which arise in your writing down and must, of course, be checked and corrected.
Aha, then that can also come into its own, which would be very good. Because if I always have to remodel everything from Swiss German into German, then that always takes a lot of time. Because everything is to be reformulated in such a way that on the one hand it says exactly what was just spoken, and on the other hand it must also effectively correspond to the German language. Many people say that this is not difficult, but that is not the case, because good German is not the same as the German of the people. Even your father Schwath pointed this out to me again and again, just as he also meticulously recorded everything in writing in German, which he often let me read. It was also he who taught me to read and write before I had to go to school, but no one except my mother knew anything about this, and she also kept quiet about it. Schwath would probably have had much better possibilities to record every single word, because he had technical possibilities at his disposal that surpass even today's earthly developments in every respect. But if everything works out as you said, then it could also remain so in the future that, if it will be possible, then also my contact reports, which have been taken away by you or by Zafanat Paneach, could be beamed back into my computer if the sectarian swinging waves cause any damage. I would love that if that could be done, because that way I would be helped a lot.
You have some really good ideas, Edouard, that make me, well, anyway, I will talk to Zafanat Paneach and put your request to him.
Thanks, my son.
I have not heard that from you for a long time.
Well, it does not have to be every day.
Of course not, but I still find it somehow connecting even though I am about 8 times older than you. Because when I consider the origin of your first personality and that of my much younger first, as well as our differences in knowledge, I think you are probably justified in calling me son sometimes.
I would not quarrel with you about that, for in the present life your 8 times greater age makes you superior to me. But something else. Your father Schwath asked me to spread his predictions worldwide, just as he also said that I myself must also strive to make and spread predictions through my own abilities. I did so several times in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, partly using his predictions, but also making my own probability calculations and predictions and sending them to governments, radio stations, newspapers, and some organizations. But this was as good as water in the Rhine, without any response. So I ask myself whether I should perhaps calculate something again and make a prediction. It would not have to be much, but something specific. What do you think about that?
That's in line with an idea you should do.
Good, then I will do it. But it will probably be like before, that the whole thing will not get through to those places where it should.
With the unreasonableness that prevails among all those decisively responsible, that is to say, the public media as well as those in power, it will certainly be so. But now, Edward, I have been here longer than I should be, because I still have an important duty to perform. So I must go now and therefore say goodbye, dear friend.